Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us for Ask the Expert today. My name is McClure, and I'm a residential realtor, and I work by referral in Northern Virginia and suburban Maryland outside of DC, and I've got referral partners in DC. And we also network with realtors all over the country. In fact, I was speaking with a realtor from another area today. So we try to keep our pulse on what's going on here locally and then further abreast. And it's really interesting what's happening in real estate across the country. We started Ask the Expert because we do love local business. We are a local business with McInerney Associates, and we love local businesses. We refer local business. It's often during tough economies that business communities survive when on the backs of small business. We certainly saw that coming out of the last recession. And I think that they can be your partners in all kinds of ways. I'm certainly leaning into my referral partner, Tom, here, when we need to get projects done at houses. And so several years ago, we started something called Ask the Expert, way before the pandemic, and we'd get a bunch of experts together in a room and have a happy hour, and people would bring their questions. And it was a great forum for getting questions answered about your house and speaking with contractors without an obligatory fee up front. So when the pandemic hit, we were brainstorming ways that we could still bring you really, really good information about local businesses. The intel applies across the board. So if you're logging in from another part of the country, it's still relevant to you. But we wanted to make sure that we had good resources here also that we could refer and that could share great information. So it's a win-win for everybody. So today I want to thank my friend Tom Payne. Tom, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Sure. Tom is with Mr. Handyman, and Tom is a local boy. He went to University of Maryland. He lives in Northern Virginia now. So he's one of those who crosses the river without trouble. There are some of us. And so he went out west following some business opportunities with Sprint years ago, and while out there picked up more intel that he uses to manage a successful business, and picked up a wife and some kids, and then came back. So Tom, we're really, really happy to have you here. You're running a very successful franchise of Mr. Handyman, and you're joining us today for what we termed Enjoy Outdoor Living, Deck and Patio Maintenance and Construction, because again, we realize people are just spending so much more time in and around their homes. And gosh, I know we'll get into it later, but if you look at the prices of pressure treated plywood, you know that there's a lot of demand. So I liked what you said when I was working on the intro, Tom, that business is booming, especially on your residential side. I do want to point out to folks listening that Tom has a commercial side. So if you have those little honeydew type lists, he can help you there too. So he can do everything from hang a bulletin board to build a deck, right, Tom?
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah. And so, but Tom has this saying, when more people are home and they're working from home and their kids are home, there are a lot more things breaking. And so I think that's why he's had such a good year. So Tom, again, welcome. We're so happy that you've joined us today, and we're really eager to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, I'm excited to share.
Good. Well, I want to touch base as usual. I'll first say that this recording will be available on our Facebook page, on our website, and on YouTube. We also make a link available to Tom. So if you want to view it later, there will be many ways to do so. And we hope that you'll pass it along to people you know and tell them about us, tell us about the great information we're imparting. I always like to before we launch into the questions, go into a little bit of a market update. And it's really interesting because we've now been, a little over a full year that we've been in this pandemic. And this time last year, we were in just full shutdown mode. And just to give you a brief update on the marketplace, if you looked at the 7 days we just completed, compared to the same 7 days last year, the number of newly ratified contracts was up 101.3% this year, which is sort of logical, right? Because it dipped so much at the beginning of the pandemic, nobody really knew how to make heads or tails of things. And the people who really, really had to move were still moving, but a lot of other people were holding off. But here's what's really interesting. So to keep the numbers in context, the number of newly ratified contracts rose 18.5% this past week over the same week in 2019. So if we take the pandemic out of the picture, we're still almost 19% higher than where we were in a very, very robust spring market in 2019. And the other thing that I thought was really interesting is throughout the region, Maryland, DC, Northern Virginia, the average time a property is spending on the market before getting a contract, and I have never seen numbers like this in my career, 14.7 days. So 2019, to give you an example, really fast, brisk, low inventory market then, it was 24.2 days. So I say it's a stranglehold on listings. If you know somebody who's been thinking of selling, downsizing, empty nesters, snowbirds, tell them they can really maximize their efforts right now. It is a great time to sell and then leave the area. So without further ado, I want to get into this interview with Tom. And Tom, as you know, we're talking about decks and patios. And as we said earlier, a lot of people are enjoying their decks now more than ever. And I was hoping you could start by giving us some tips for maintaining a deck, both in terms of the stability, the posts that hold the deck, and the safety factors, as well as the aesthetic factors, because I think, unfortunately, sometimes people think of the aesthetic ones first, but they're both really important. So if you could speak to stain and railings and posts and those kinds of things, that'd be great.
Yeah, exactly. And you hit the nail on the head, literally. People are spending a lot more time at home. The entire family, mom, dad, kids, the whole shooting match are spending a lot more time at home. And now the weather is getting nicer, hence a lot more time outside. So therefore, when you go out on your deck, you want it to be safe. So some really basic points. When you're walking, just take a walk around your deck, look for nails that are sticking out, potential splinters, some cracked boards or something like that. And just kind of just do a once over, hammering the boards, do a little shake on the railing. And if it's a little loose, tighten up a little. Some other things, basic. If you're under a tree and the leaves fall, that's what happens, as you see in this picture, the before and after. All the wet and the mold and the mildew comes, and that's just a slippery substance. And so pressure washing, power washing, keeping that clean and stained with some good old Ready Seal, stain and seal your deck. You see that saying, spend 2 hours every 6 months. And again, that's about the time it takes to do a walkthrough. Look at your deck, look at the nail pops, the screws, a quick pressure wash. It's easier to pressure wash a deck that it's only been pressure washed 1 year ago versus pressure washing a deck that hasn't been pressure washed in 10 years. So it's a lot easier to maintain, and it looks nicer as well. And when things look a lot nicer, we spend a lot more time on it. So
that's great. And I think that fact that you gave about 2 hours for every 6 months, I mean, that's not a huge commitment. You could break it into 10 to 15 minute chunks every, once a month, and just call someone like you if you do start to see some issues. And honestly, if you walk around barefoot on that deck very much, you're going to know if there are nail pops or splinters or, what have you. So it always scares me when I see those slippery decks like you were talking about. I just,
Yes. And again, that little nail pop in the center picture, all it takes is to walk out there barefoot once, and that's a uncomfortable situation.
Yeah, just gave me the chills down my spine. So Tom, how long should somebody expect that a deck might last? And then are there components of it that last longer than others?
Sure. And we're going to talk about this later. There's the natural wood deck versus the composite deck. So the natural wood decks, they can last up to 15, 20 years, but like anything, you have to maintain it. You have to properly stain it, clean it, make sure the nails and screws and everything's connected and sturdy as that. So again, with maintain the tech decks, they can last a lot longer, but again, it's an individual preference. Tech decks are great if you just want to pressure wash it in a low maintenance kind of standard. If you would like a more aesthetic and nice and customizable and wood carvings and everything, then a natural wood deck is the way to go for you. Again, there's not a hard, fast rule. It's a lot on preference, but again, you would have to maintain like anything. So.
I always think about when I'm on home inspections, a lot of times that's my context for these Ask the Expert series we do. And I see the home inspectors, they'll take like a screwdriver and they'll, jam it into the posts. And it's interesting to me how often those big 6x6s have rot. I mean, significant amount of rot at the bottom. And I guess it's just people are really just they're enjoying their deck from the top and not thinking about the underside, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, just think of when it rains, water goes down and it goes down and if it nails out of place or there's a little crack, water finds the path of least resistance and it just takes some time. What's the saying? An ounce of prevention is worth a pound.
Yes.
So
it's so true. So how could somebody refresh the look of a deck without having to build a new one? Like, can staining it make, a big difference? You did talk about pressure washing, that's a really essential component to maintenance. But I'm just wondering about, does the stain help prolong the life? And then also, as far as refreshing, if you could speak to things like with people spending more time out there, maybe adding lighting or adding bench seating or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. Just like a fresh coat of paint on anything, it adds a certain new vibrant look about it. A lot of stains today conceal like a water sealant, which basically that plus the pressure treated wood plus the stain, it's just another layer of protection. So absolutely. And again, just it's a fresh coat of paint gives it a certain vibrant appearance. But yes, people are doing all kinds of things on their deck. Solar lighting around the deck, around the handles. People with those little fire pit tables, not the actual fire pits that go in the ground, but the ones that you can sit and they're on a table. You put a propane tank and you sit out there, have a glass of wine at night or some hot chocolate with the kids or whatever, and sitting on their deck. And so a lot of more comfortable, I don't want to say higher end, but not the plastic chairs that a lot of people use.
Right.
They're investing in a lot nicer furniture because they're spending a lot more time on the deck. So yes, a lot of it.
I think it's really, really nice to see,
Yeah, me too. I agree with that.
See people get kind of creative with it and make their yards look a little bit better. So what are you seeing as far as what kinds of materials are in the highest demand? I know you spoke a little to their budgetary issues, but I'm also wondering what, just generally you're seeing a lot of, and, what people might want to consider as they think about materials and what's, what are the popular choices, I guess.
Well, yeah, you mentioned earlier that, supply and demand. So pressure treated wood is at a very high demand right now. The prices are almost up 400 or 500% of what they were just based off of need and desire and want and everything like that. So some good advice I would talk to the people who are thinking about either building a deck or upgrading or refurbishing a deck that's going to require a lot of material. Because when you talk to your contractor or whoever you decide to do the work for, when they give you an estimate, a lot of time to consider is that estimate's only good for like 30 or 60 days because of the cost of material. It's dramatically increasing like that. So some good advice based off of materials and need and desire and all that is to, if you do decide to do it, make sure you have the capital up front, because obviously there's always budgetary, questions and stuff like that. But when you get an estimate, be prepared to, if you're going to do it within 30 days. So there's not that, well, you quoted this and 6 months down the road, it's, gone up substantially. So that's some advice I would have to people working on deck based on the demand of the pressure treated wood.
Were you the person I was speaking with who said that a board you could buy like a year or so ago was about $5 or $6, and that seemed what did you say? 35?
Yeah, it was like a pressure treated 4x4 piece of wood. It was like $5. Now it's like $20-$25. So yeah, it's amazing just based on demand.
That's really staggering.
It is staggering. That same conversation. It's just go to a Lowe's on a Monday afternoon or a Home Depot on Monday afternoon. That's when you'll see the true, where it used to be full all the time. Not anymore.
It'll look like the toilet paper shelves in light of a snowstorm. Right?
That's exactly what it looks like. Exactly right.
Oh gosh, well that's scary. I I had told my brother-in-law how expensive. I said, this stuff is like gold now. And, you know, unfortunately, we're hearing about thefts on job sites and so on, but he had gone to Home Depot with his son, who's 8, and they were building a fort, you know, nothing fancy, just a few pieces of plywood or whatever. And he came back and he said, I cannot believe how much it is. You weren't kidding. And I mean, I just don't think it really hit him when I said how expensive it was until he went to buy it. So anyway, you know, a lot of times people buy these older homes. We're seeing sort of a willingness to buy things in as is condition given market conditions. And so they've got those old concrete slab patios, and sometimes they're real low. You know, you walk out the sliding glass door and they're real low and they're not in great shape, and maybe they've sloped away from the house. And people want to build a deck, something that looks a little nicer, or they're up on a higher level and they want to build a deck over a lower patio. In either case, or maybe I should say both cases, can you build a deck over an existing patio? If you could speak to both the high and the low version.
So yes, the bottom line is yes for both. It's not going to hurt it if you build a lower patio over. It'll just be there, which is fine. It won't grow grass. It'll be just like a patio. So that. If you do want to build a higher deck, so you can actually, there's two thoughts behind that. One, it provides a shelter for like maybe some lawn or some lawn equipment, some gardening or some things. Or depending on the size of your deck, you can actually have a nice patio space underneath with, you know, like some tables, a ping pong table, you know, just a seating arrangement for those hot summer evenings when you want to get in the shade and enjoy some time. So the answer is yes, you can do both. With patios, and again, it's the same premise. You can do whatever you want. That's the great thing about if this pandemic has done anything, it's to let people get creative on their outdoor living area. So that's been, you know, people are taking advantage of that to get away from the inside.
I think that's great. You know, I like seeing something under the higher decks, because if there's nothing there, not even gravel, what happens a lot of the time is then it becomes a muddy mess where it drips down through the deck, and then they're tracking in mud underneath. So, you know, from my 2 cents in a practical standpoint, not speaking anything to the building structure, but it seems like a nice thing to not have, because the grass won't really grow too much under the deck. So it's nice. I did have one client a few years ago get very creative and do an AstroTurf because they couldn't get anything to grow. So they got a high-end AstroTurf, and they had a dog, and they would just hose it down, which when she told me, I thought, and sorry if you're watching, I thought it was weird at first, right? But then I went and saw it, and I was like, this is genius, because it always looked good. It was clean, you know, and she didn't have anything to clean up. The kids could play on it, of course, after she washed the dog's pee off. But, you know, it was a very interesting and creative solution. And I bet there's more of that kind of thing going on right now.
Sure, absolutely. I mean, you could get as creative as you want. I mean, I've seen the people that have the larger deck and they keep it underneath for almost like an outdoor rec room with a ping pong table for the kids, and you know, all kinds of stuff. So,
can you share with us some of the things people need to consider as far as design and permitting? And permitting could be, you know, the permitting from your local jurisdiction, but then also something I think people forget is if they're in an HOA, they have to check. So could you speak to that for a little bit?
Yes. Yeah, that is the $1 million question in a lot of these cases. So if you just, you know, and, you know, did a great service and put you in a house of your dreams, but it didn't have a deck, where to go and how do we start? So the first question I always say is talk to your local HOA. That's first and foremost. What can you do? Because if you can't build a deck there, it doesn't do any purpose, you know, doing any research if you can. So you ask, what kind of deck? Can it be wood? Does it have to be Trek? Can it be composite? Whatever insert, you know, type of material can it be? So once you get all that information, then reach out to your local permitting company or permitting county. So a lot of times the county will say, you need this. A hard, fast rule, but is it 100%? Is if you have to attach something to the house on the outside, you need a permit. 95% of the time accurate. So if you have a deck, you need to screw it into your house or screw it into the cement walls, you will need a permit. So always check with your local county permitting department. So once you check with them, they'll say, well, what type of deck do you do? Some specific cities or counties require an actual architectural drawing. Some people just require what kind of material and what's the measurement, period. But remember, also when you get HOA approval, the type of deck for permitting, the last foremost is, remember, if you get a permit, the permit person will come out and inspect it. So that's what a lot of people think, oh, I don't have to do it and I'll just kind of do it half the way and we'll stop. No, remember, they're going to come out and check it for the official final blessing of that. So please, please, please remember that. That's a step that a lot of people forget about the checking. So,
back when we weren't in as aggressive of a seller's market, there would be times I would call a contractor. I knew if I saw something that looked wonky, but I'm not a contractor, I'm not in construction. And I would just say, hey, could you come take a look at this? And I had enough sense to know this doesn't look right, but it was always scary when they would come out and go, yeah, if you guys buy this house, don't get out on this deck. Wait until you do some work on it. And it's like, and then like later the contractor would whisper, I didn't want to scare them too bad, but if they were to have dinner out here with a few people, that deck could come off. And it's just like, oh my gosh, and you envision that whoever's living there has been using it, So,
you would think, Ann, you would think.
Yeah. So those are some really good tips. I've seen some very, very, very expensive mistakes by not contacting the HOA first.
Yes.
What about guidelines for things like railings? We always get the graspable handrail that comes up a lot. And then like risers, which are this part of the stair, and then the tread is this part. How about guidelines for railing height and risers and treads and that kind of thing?
Absolutely. So the basic railing height is 34 to 38 inches tall. So about 3 feet is the height of the railing. And you mentioned the risers. So the poles between is a 4-inch. They figured 4 inches is enough where Junior can't climb all the way through because he's big enough to walk and that kind of thing. So 4 inches apart.
Between the railings?
Correct. So you have the top and the railings. That's correct.
Okay.
And you mentioned the risers and stairs. So the risers normally are 3/4 of an inch thick, to step on. But the maximum height of a step is 8 1/4 inch. So again, it varies about a 1/2 inch from county to county, but a good rule is 8 inches. But you can have a 1 inch tall step because depending on the rise and how many steps and the grade and how you want it and everything. But on average, it's normally between 6 and 8 inches is the height of the step.
I always find it interesting when you're on those decks where it looks like somebody didn't do the math right, and either the top step or the bottom step's like this huge drop.
Yeah. Yeah, we've repaired some of those because the person says, "Why is that sick?" And 2 inches is a pretty good, amount from when you're point blank range to see the difference. It makes a big difference.
Well, and you don't think about it, but you get in a rhythm when you're walking. So
yeah, absolutely.
If you've got 7 3/4, 7 3/4, 7 3/4, 10, that can really be a fall.
Last step, that last step's a doozy. That's right.
Yeah. So Tom, I really like patios. I'm just one of those who I just love, and it depends on the style of the house and the lay of the land and all that. But I love a patio. I don't know what it is. I feel like it's like a little bit more natural and it's sort of embedded in the actual land itself. And I mentioned earlier, traditionally we'd see these like kind of an ugly over the years stain. Sometimes it'd be rust stains and tree stains. Just a square or rectangular pad off the back of the house. But now we're seeing flagstone, we're seeing pavers, we're seeing stamped concrete. We might see like pea gravel. What are you commonly seeing? And do you have any recommendations on materials that you like or nice or stand the test of time?
Yeah, exactly. If you don't have maybe you have a ranch home that you only have one level. So, or maybe you're like Ann, that you just like to have your feet hit the ground. I mean, that's the the best thing you can have. So we are seeing a lot of like the stamped concrete, but what we're really seeing a lot of is just the big areas for chairs and fire pits. Fire pits are just seem to be where you do the s'mores with the kids or have a glass of wine with your spouse, or you have some friends over and you just want to just relax and talk the evening away. But again, with the pandemic, people are really taking the time to invest in, beautifying, for lack of a better word, the outdoors. You could see it really adds to the home. Like that fire pit is perfect. I know where I would be spending my evenings at that home. And
I
again,
love that.
a lot of outdoor cooking as well. I mean, that almost looks like an old brick pizza place, kind of over there. But people are actually making outdoor barbecue / stoves where they sit there and they have their evening meal outside while they cook. So again, it's a lot of time. But having said that, when you have this, you have to upkeep it. Pressure washing is key. I mean, you got to keep it clean. You got to keep if you mow the lawn and you get grass shavings, or you have trees around with the leaves over there, like anything, if you maintain it, it lasts longer, it looks nicer, and it's safer. I mean, that's the biggest thing. Yeah.
And I guess one thing that's nice about, like, if you do stones or pavers or something that's not set in concrete, if you've got trees nearby, big trees, maybe you want to think about that, because then you won't have that broken up concrete problem that we see a lot of places, right?
Absolutely. That's a really, really good point. And again, you may plant a dogwood there 5 years ago, but in 10, 15 years, if you're still in that house, that dogwood has grown a little bit, both up and out with the roots. And absolutely strongly consider that when you're putting down that.
Those were some beautiful pictures. I agree with you. I loved the fire pit, and I liked the one on the right because it had pavers that looked like they were set in smaller stones. So sort of a combination, which was really nice. And you just spoke a little bit about maintaining a patio, which was helpful, and then some of the design trends with outdoor cooking. Are you finding that some patios are more environmentally friendly than others, or that's a trend that's growing, that people are kind of like choosing things that are environmentally friendly?
I think the latter. People are choosing things that are more environmentally friendly. What has changed is the cleaning solution that they use to clean it. Rather, if they spray water, that's obviously the best. But if you need a cleaning solution, they're looking for that eco-friendly soap to use over that, not bleach or whatever the oil cutting cleansing fluid is. That's where the environmental impact has had the greatest effect.
I feel like I've seen more of my clients over the years starting to trend that way. I remember I had a client who got in trouble. She had the prettiest yard on the street. I mean, just the garden was beautiful, it was maintained beautifully, but she had grass that had some clover in it, and the HOA got involved and they said, you've got to treat this and get rid of the clover. And so she was working with an organic company because she had a pile of kids. They had 8 kids and they played outside all the time. And she also loved nature. And she said, she'd plant for pollinators. And she said, I'm not going to use something that's not environmentally friendly, but you can see my contract. I have people come. It's not quite as effective as the poison, but it's way better for the bees and the kids and the animals. And anyway, it turned into this huge hubbub, and they ended up leaving the community over it.
Wow.
Which was really interesting to me. But I thought, this is something the community should think about. I mean, really losing honeybees has a big ripple effect. And I know I sound like a tree hugger right now, but it really is something I think more and more people will be thinking about, over time. So I was really surprised that's what drove them out, but that is what drove them out. And I mean, not just to say it was what chemicals, but I think it was also the mentality of the powers that be in that homeowners association, So, Tom, one of the things that I've really enjoyed seeing, and I also felt like this was a trend, and tell me what you think, is more outdoor lighting. Like whether it's the little twinkle lights or uplighting on trees. And then like you mentioned earlier, like the solar lights, is that what you said, around a deck?
Yeah.
I just think that's such a nice feature. And like the fire pit, it allows people to enjoy it even into the later hours of the evening, right?
Absolutely. And you saw like kind of, so they'll have like a walkway from the patio that goes under all the way out to a little area, and they have like a little lighted walkway, and the solar lights are wonderful because you don't have to change the light bulb, and you just stick them in where you want them, and there's no cord or anything, and it's environmentally sound because it's solar power, and it's pretty affordable to make something that looks nice like that. So yes, that's a, you know, again, the more time we spend, the nicer we want to look and the safer we want.
And I think there are, doing a little plug for the solar lights, I think there are some that are better than others, because I know our friend Patio, the landscape architect, always says, don't buy the ones at Costco, because she's like, you know, they hold light for about 20 minutes and then they fall over in your yard and they look crappy. But I shouldn't have said they look like that. They don't look as good.
There we go. That's more politically correct, Dan.
Right. So this has been such a good discussion, and I hope that it's going to help people maintain their properties. And actually, I thought of one more question I want to ask Tom, unless Jennifer tells me there are any questions. But one of the things that I wanted to ask real quick is, with the cost of lumber and treated wood being what it is it, do you think, more cost effective to consider a patio these days? Like to do something with stone, is that in better supply with less price hikes, or is it similarly expensive?
It's similar. I mean, you saw those patios. You can really invest a lot of money at the fancy, nicer patios. Just and decks, you can go bare bones minimum, and they look pretty nice. So yeah, it's what you make it. It's six in one hand, half a dozen in the other. So that's what you make it.
Well, I want to finish by thanking you and saying, here is your contact information. I will say, from my own experiences with Tom, he's just the most pleasant guy. He's very responsive, really good to deal with, and he's great. Like if you have those little honeydew projects up to bigger projects. So, you know, don't be embarrassed if you want to call and say, can you help me hang some pictures in my house? Or if you need something a lot bigger, like, hey, we have a 20 by 30 deck, and we see a lot of maintenance, check out the deck hangers, check out the nail pops, check out the plywood, all of that stuff, the boards, I mean. So Tom will be happy to help you. This information will be available also, again, on our website, on our Facebook page, on YouTube, and we're going to make it available to Tom, so it'll be on his website, and you have his contact info here. If you're watching this or you watched it at some point, you know me, and you misplaced the information and want to reach out to Tom later, never hesitate. Jennifer and I can put you in touch. And Jennifer, did we have any questions or any comments that you want to add?
Hey, no, nothing right now. I think we're running out of time. So
okay. Well, great. Well, then we will wrap up. If you're watching this and you know somebody, or you yourself want some advice on real estate, I do happen to know a good realtor I can put you in touch with, and I'm happy to answer any questions I can. So we'll catch you again in 2 weeks for another episode of Ask the Expert. We're working on some good topics, and we thank you again for joining us. And thank you, Tom and Jennifer, for everything that you did to make today happen.
Thank you, Ann. Much appreciated. Have a good day.
You too.